posse.
Thank you, Dan. Major General Dean Milner began his career at Royal Roads and the Royal Military College. He was first posted to the Royal Canadian Dragoons in 1984, then stationed in Lahr, Germany, as far as 4 Mechanized Brigade Group. Eventually sent to Petawawa to endure as the adjutant. He was the OC of A Squadron and then headquarters squadron before assuming command of the regiment in 2002. The following year, he led the RCD battle group to Bosnia as part of NATO's SFOR, where for 6 months I was honored to be able to say he was my commanding officer. That was the first in a series of stellar command appointments. In 2011, he went to Texas as the Deputy Commanding General Canadian of 3 Armored Corps and Fort Hood. 3 years later, he assumed command of 1st Canadian Division. From May 2013 to March 2014, he ran NATO's training mission in Afghanistan. Retiring in October 2018 after 38 years of service, General Milner was made Colonel of the Regiment of the Royal Canadian Dragoons. It is my absolute pleasure, then, to give the podium to Major General Dean Milner.
Okay. Well, first of all, it's a real pleasure to be here to speak to you, and I'm a big fan of the RCMI. They've been trying to get me to be a member, and I probably should be, because I really do like the place and like what it stands for. And just an opportunity for us to talk about a number of things, and I thank the ambassadors. But just to talk about defense. To talk about Canada and our contributions to NATO, which I think are so very important, and I'll be very honest, we just don't do enough of that in this country. And I think when I look at where the world is today, I think it's so very significant that we do a little bit more of that. So really appreciate this group for everything you do, and hope to do more. So I'll just start out by, well, first of all, I'll go back. I just came back from the Netherlands last night, and I had the opportunity to take a whole bunch of soldiers over to the Netherlands, and a bunch of retired dragoons. And I'm sure you are well aware, we liberated a good part of the Netherlands. And at the same time, that hard fight, we lost about 7,500 Canadians and a whole shitload more wounded. And it was good to be appreciated. We were extremely well taken care of, and we kind of maneuvered where all of our units operated in the Netherlands. It was a good feeling, but I mean, one of the big takeaways for me is that there's a big price for freedom, and we sure as hell don't want to go back to that, right? I mean, there was a lot more than that. That's the Netherlands. So we touched on the Netherlands. There was the rest of the other fights in World War II, and then there's the fights since then. But it was a big note for me is the significance of that, right? It took us a long time to get to 90 or to 44 and 45 in that war. Before World War II, we were tiny. We were isolated as a country. Our forces were super tiny. And by the end of that war, we were a very capable. We were one of the bigger capable countries when you look at Europe and North America. So that's kind of to start a little bit of that. So I'm going to go to 1984. I went to Germany as a young second lieutenant. They gave me 4 tanks. 4 tanks and 16 soldiers. Joined a big brigade, and the mandate of that brigade was pretty simple. We joined a bigger NATO force, and we were there, Cold War, to deter the Russians. So I took my tank troop, and quite often we went to the border, the Czech border. Here's a young second lieutenant with my tank. Not a bad tank. Leopard tank. Forced to buy that Leopard tank because our old Centurions were getting old, and a prime minister at the time, senior to the one we have now, said, look, I mean, you've got some pretty old equipment here in Germany. You're not pulling your weight. So we got a Leopard tank. Not a bad tank. It was already getting old. Typical Canadians, we always got the old stuff, right? But it was still a pretty good tank. And we had around us a lot of other great equipment. Not initially, but we ended up buying an F-18. And everybody knows the F-18. We've had it for 40-some plus years now. It's getting old. But you actually felt pretty good and what we did then, that was really deterrence by denial. And I've only really understood that, to be honest. And that because the bottom line is that nobody wanted to muck with us because we were a bigger force. We were with the Brits and the Americans and the Dutch and the Belgiques and many others. Nobody really wanted to muck. We could see the Russians. We could hear them on the radio. We could hear the Czechs. You know, I mean, the presence was huge. So that deterrence was deterrence by denial. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but really I want to just focus on a couple points. So I'm going to look at the Cold War. I'm going to look at a little bit about our contributions since the Cold War. I'm going to look at our situation now in NATO, because it's really not that good as a country. So NATO, as we know, it's really the cornerstone of our defense policy. Right? It's really the cornerstone. I mean, that's the big collective organization that we're part of. Collective defense, crisis management. I mean, getting things right because, wars are around us, and we've potentially got more coming. Cooperative security. So being part of the team. How much part of the team are we? Okay, that's the big part of it. We've always been a pretty strong supporter of NATO. There's no doubt about it, and I'll give a lot of good examples of that, and maybe not some other good ones. Canada prides itself, and listen to this carefully. We pride ourselves on being agile, deployable, and responsive for NATO. I could look at a few of you around the room, and I don't think you'd tell me that. I think we say we are. I could look at a Dave Fraser and a few others and say how rapid and agile are we as a Canadian force right now? I'd argue not very good. Now we have been. So we have been, absolutely. So I think right now, I mean, and that's kind of as an introduction, I think we've lost a little bit of that deterrence and capability for that bigger NATO team. History says a lot. So you look at the Cold War, we were one of the founders of NATO. I mean, we 5 years of too many people dying, we realized that, and we were isolated before World War II. Isolated. Are we isolated now? Not really. But that main aim was to deter the Soviet Union and to eliminate rivalries. We had significant troop contributions, significant, 50s, 60s. Although John back there told me, it wasn't as big as I thought. I actually thought we were bigger, but still we were a significant force in Europe. We started in northern Germany. We had air capabilities. We had a huge Navy. Huge Navy. I think at one point, weren't we the third largest Navy? I don't want to even guess what we are now. 403rd. But I mean, the bottom line is we were significant, and I'm being maybe a little hard here, but and then things start to get away. You get further you get away from wars, we get a little bit more comfortable, don't we? So in '69, Trudeau at the time, Senior, said we need to bring a lot of that stuff out of Germany. Let's get it out of Germany. So we argued about, but we pulled a bigger force out. And that force we pulled out of Germany, we said, we'll use that money to support the military. We didn't do that. That money went back in somewhere else. I'm not quite sure. But we were still there. We were a fairly good force. We were a force down in southern Germany. I was part of that in the 80s. It's still a pretty good sized brigade. We were actually one of the stronger brigades. And during that period, we got the F-18s and we got the Leopard tanks when everybody else was getting the Leopard 2s and others, but we were still a very capable force. Then 93 comes around. Mulrooney says, okay, and rightly so, everybody else is getting out of Germany and all that stuff, so let's pull out. But let's give that money, let's make sure we're using that money for defense. That money didn't go to defense. It went somewhere else. I don't know where it went. So that investment back in the forces, and we were 85, 90,000. We're slowly now down to I think we're under 60,000 right now. But we still are trying to be agile, deployable, responsive. That's one of our big aims. Contributions since the Cold War, not bad. I mean, we went to Bosnia. I was Bosnia twice as a battle group commander. We did some pretty good things, but we started, our contributions continued, really started to get smaller. No brigades anymore. We'll send a battle group. We'll send a battalion. So, contributions to Bosnia pretty good. Although I got detained in Bosnia because I had a tank trainer. So I was actually taken prisoner in Bosnia. And I wasn't overly happy with that because it was part of a UN mandate and I wanted a NATO mandate. But we got a NATO mandate, so it made it a little better. Kosovo. So we go to Kosovo. We sent a battle group, not a big battle group, small battle group. We sent some CF-18s. I actually got over with General Hanot on that one, and we were doing some pretty good stuff there. Afghanistan. We go to Afghanistan, and we were pretty good in that. We went to a tough spot in Afghanistan. Dave Fraser, a bunch of us. I actually got a chance to command there. I was our last commander in Kandahar. Served with the good Americans, but we didn't send a brigade. We sent a kind of a brigade, tiny, minus. We sent a brigade with a battle group. And I ended up with U.S. under command, U.S. soldiers. I ended up with a cavalry squadron, and I ended up with a striker, because we didn't have enough to fill out a brigade. Because when you're fighting a counterinsurgency, you need a big force, right? We didn't send any F-18s, we sent a few helicopters, but we did send it to a tough area. And we had 158 soldiers killed. I mean, that's a significant sacrifice. But anyway, it was good. But the point being is that we didn't send a big force. And then we moved on, we did the training mission. So we pulled out of Kandahar, left it to the good Americans. So they'll take over our AOR, because we've done that now. Prime Minister Harper said, let's get out of there, let's do something, let's train. So we did the training mission for 3 years, pretty good. I was the boss of that too. Pretty happy to be the boss of that. And then in 14, we came home when Singapore left the NATO mission. Singapore. Us and Singapore left in 2014. And we were the biggest part of the training mission. We had the second largest contingent for training in Afghanistan. huge impact. So we pulled out, we had the institutions at about 50%. We pulled out, nobody filled our spots. Nobody. Nobody probably realizes that. They didn't fill our spots because they had to carry on around the country, fight other things. I tried to talk Prime Minister Harper out of it. He said, no, Dean, no, we're coming out. I said, okay, sure, gotcha. So that's kind of after. So, I mean, still some significant contributions. Where we are today, challenges today. I'm glad the CDS isn't in here because he thinks I'm too hard on us. Probably gonna walk through that door any minute. But so now we're in a kind of a state in the world right now, and I like talking about economies and I like talking about that. But we got a war going on. Right? And we're not going to be fixing economies, not going to be doing a lot of things here until we get this one right. And then we got that big China over there. What did China just do in Taiwan? They just did their battle runs, like what the Russians did a year ago. They're actually almost replicating what the Russians did. My son was over there a couple years ago and he said, hey, Dad, we got a load of bloody Russians on the border. I said, yeah, I mean, it looks like a pretty good rehearsal, doesn't it? So he was there training the Ukrainians, small numbers, Canadians. We had a few over there. We did some pretty good training. But all that to say is that I think right now where we sit is that Canada's contribution to NATO, we've given a bunch of money to the Ukrainians. But we really haven't done that much. I mean, we've given, I don't know what number we are. We've given them some of our Carl Gs. Everybody know what a Carl G is? Pretty old kit, pretty old equipment. So we've given them a bunch of our old stuff. Now, we have given them some new things. But I really would like to see this country talk a little bit more about defense. So that poor guy that didn't make it in the Ukraine talked too much about the army. I think we're kind of like that too. If we think of our prime ministers talk a little bit too much about defense, they're not going to probably gain any votes, are they? Unless they do it in a bit of a smarter way. Because, I'm maybe, generals are always optimists, right? We're known to be, hey Dave, aren't we known to be optimists? This is a time frame where I'm not really that optimistic. I honestly, and I'll tell you, I honestly think we'll be at war in 3 to 4 years. Big. That's Dino talking. But I honestly think that, this country needs to wake up a little bit. Because we're not. This last budget never even talked about defense. So everybody in this room shouldn't feel good about that. And we also said that our defense policy that we're supposed to come out this year, we'll just shove it down the road another year. So you saw a pretty good letter, and I was pretty happy with CDA, because I haven't been overly happy with them. Put out a pretty, and a whole bunch of good people. The Peter McKays of the world, and a whole bunch of others said, you know what? We got to start talking a little bit more about defense, because this nation is extremely capable, and we can rise to the occasion, and we can kick ass. But we're not given the resources, and I can go on. We just sent 5 tanks from my unit to the Ukraine. You know what we got left that works? I'd be embarrassed to tell you. We're not getting the budget. We're not getting the equipment. We're not getting a lot of things that we need, that we really need to start going. We need to talk more about defense in this country. And I probably talked a little bit. I'm a passionate guy. You can see that. The Americans. I'm a big fan of the Americans. God damn it. But we've been riding on so many people's coattails with defense. And I really think that we need, you guys and more. We don't have lobbyists. We don't have anybody really talking defense in this country. And I'd like to see more of it. So I ask, you to maybe think about that. So, Dave, I got anything else I need to talk about? Probably. I don't. I probably talked long enough. I really thank the opportunity, because I really do think that this is a great country, but we really need to really step it up a lot more. And I don't know where, and I hate airing some dirty laundry out with a few other countries here, but I think you're going to see our arms getting twisted a whole bunch more, maybe like we did 15, 20 years ago. So, thank you on that note. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So how do we get this done? Sensitize the Canadian population to the need to have a bigger budget for defense. I think people in this room, like we're in, but how do we sensitize the 20-year-old, the 30-year-old, the 40-year-old to the need to do this?
I mean, it's a great question. And I don't have a perfect answer for that, because I mean, I'd be probably out there trying to do it. It's funny though, when I was with the Dutch for the liberation, so there was a lot of, I partook in about 15 different significant commemorations while I was over there last week. And every event I went to was full of youngsters, kids, university, they were at everything, and they were there unveiling something new, but they were all trying to bring back the memories. So I mean, that's one, is you got to continue to educate the young, because we don't want, I mean, we have it kind of happening now, but it's only in the Ukraine. So we're fat, dumb, and happy here in Canada, and we'll go and fight if we have to. There's no doubt about it. But I think it really takes a lot of work. I mean, you got to educate. Somehow we need a political voice that's not scared to say, I need to give you money for this, I need to give you money for that. I mean, we're very good at giving people money for everything, but the hard things, we're a discrepancy, or discretionary, fund. How do you convince people that the world isn't good? That when you have that deterrence, that does deny the bad guys what they want to do. But when you're not strong, the Georgias, the Crimeas, the Ukraines happen, right? Because we're not deterring anybody. The NATO alliance is not. We're on paper, we're kind of strong, but we're not really. The Dutch got rid of all their tanks. The Brits got rid of, General Sharif, this guy coming on, was my boss 3 times. He's not going to be a happy guy. He's another tanker. But I mean, the bottom line is that I think politicians don't like talking the tough stuff, right? So I think that's one of the things. But how do you couch it that we don't want a World War II? We're kind of heading that direction. How do you say that? How do you educate people that I got to push some more? We need submarines. The Americans have asked us to go and refuel things. We can't even do that. Let's go refuel things. We don't have air defense. I mean, I could go on and on and on. But I think, we got to educate more. But we need, even our opposition hasn't even talked defense since he's been the opposition guy. I'm not even sure he knows what defense is. I mean, the bottom line, I haven't heard him say anything about it. Peter MacKay, maybe. But I don't have any big answers, but I think we just need to talk more. We need politicians to be forced a little bit more to talk about it. How you do that, I'm not very good at that. I drive my tank over things, but I'm not very persuasive. I'd be out the door. Yes, go ahead.
Over the past many years, Vladimir Putin and his wealthy friends have massively expanding their military bases in the Arctic. What could you say about...
Who is, sorry?
Vladimir Putin and his rich friends.
Yes.
What could you say about the vulnerability of Canadian Arctic?
Oh, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? We just sent a bunch of dragoons up there, tankers that did an exercise. We don't have any kind of radar capabilities. We don't have any fighter. We're going to get the F-35s, but as you know, because we joined it 10, 15 years late, Harper pushed that down the road. Trudeau pushed it down the road. I think we're going to have the F-35s by what, 35? 26, we might get one or two of them. We're like so far down the order of March. The Australians, I'd love to be like the Australians, but they're off on their own, right? They bought the F-35s 15 years ago. But not 15, maybe 10 now. They bought 5 of them and said, hey, we need to try them. But we don't have a lot. We rely on the Americans for the North. We really are going to rely on the North. We don't have any ships. We don't have any submarines. I was in a submarine. One of our submarines, I could have been, I'm pretty good claustrophobic. That submarine didn't sound too good. I was under the water for 24 hours. The old Windsor, HMCS Windsor, I did a big attack with that thing. But we didn't join the U.S. and the U.S., the Aussies and the Brits. How can we not be part of that? That's a disgrace. So who's going to be running our waters? The Americans. We'll rely on the Americans. Right? We do a lot. We rely on the Americans. So our North, I'm not sure how we'll defend the North. I don't really know, but not with a bunch of Rangers that we have up there. But we got Dave. Did you want to ask a question? Or my do you want to sort me out? Dave always sorts me out. Okay, I'll put it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Dean. We know even better now that there are diplomats and there are soldiers. And Dean Milner is an armored soldier.
This has been another in our series of webcasts produced by the Royal Canadian Military Institute in Toronto as a public educational service. You can find news of upcoming events and links to our webcast archives at www.rcmi.org. On behalf of the RCMI, this is Eric Morse saying goodbye for now, and thank you for joining us.